This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Good morning, everybody. Well, I want today to compare and contrast two very different leadership styles. One, Donald Trump, and the other, Theresa May. And I'm going to ask you whether you think maybe, just maybe, our Prime Minister should take a leaf out of Donald Trump's book, or whether you think, no, he's too crass, he's too loud, he's too vulgar, but hey, is he getting things done? Now, last night, it was the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner, and this is where the press pack from Washington come into big dining room within the White House. There are always comedians, and traditionally they take the mickey out of the current president, the ex-presidents, and it's something presidents always attend. Not the Donald. For the second year in a row, he's boycotted it. He basically hates the mainstream media. He sees them as being the enemy. He sees them as being the opposition. And I guess kind of, given the mess the Democrats are in, that perhaps is the case. Now, he instead went to Washington in Michigan State, and he was talking about his negotiating technique with North Korea.
We are doing things that are good. I think we'll have a meeting over the next 3 or 4 weeks. It's going to be a very important meeting. The denuclearization of the Korean peninsula of North Korea. The denuke. But we'll see how it goes. And again, whatever happens, happens. Look, I may go in, may not work out, I leave.
Do you get that? Look, I may go in, it may not work out, I leave. It's called the art of the deal. And he went on to talk about the European Union and his attitude towards them.
With the European Union last year, it sounds so nice, the European Union. You know why? I mean, they literally did, like I said, they formed to take advantage of the United States. And I don't blame them. You know what? I don't blame them. I don't blame President Xi. I don't blame Prime Minister Abe of Japan. I don't blame the heads of these countries for taking advantage of us. I blame past presidents and past leaders of our country.
Rather as I've tried never to blame everybody in Brussels, but blame the British politicians who've got us into the mess that we're currently in. But again, you see, why is Trump talking tough like that? He's talking tough because we're coming up to a deadline. He intends to impose tariffs on steel and aluminium, as they say in the States, aluminium, as we say here. That deadline's coming up, and he's talking tough. And he's saying, look, you're not letting our agricultural products in. You're putting big tariffs on our cars. It's all part of the negotiation. He wrote a book about this some years ago. It's called The Art of a Deal. And the one thing that I know from my years in business is when you have a meeting, the one thing the other person absolutely has to know is that you are prepared to walk away. Now, we had early on with Mrs. May, she parroted out the lines, one that I think I can almost claim authorship of, which was no deal is better than a bad deal. If they're not prepared to play ball, you just walk and get on with life and sort the mess out. But that now has been dropped completely. We now have a Prime Minister who frankly is absent without leave this weekend. She's nowhere to be seen, leaving the beleaguered, embattled Home Secretary Amber Rudd, who isn't just in trouble over Windrush, and I'll talk a bit more about that as the hour develops, but she's increasingly in real trouble over her European Union stance. There she was on Thursday. She was at a lobby lunch in Westminster, and she couldn't say emphatically that we would leave the customs union. And today, the Sunday Times say, Rudd teeters as leaked papers show she backs plan to water down Brexit. Basically, she's backing a plan that would give EU nationals preferential treatment in terms of coming to this country over people from the rest of the world. And if you remember the big referendum debate about immigration, it was that we should treat people equally regardless where they come from. So I'm asking you this morning, do you think Prime Minister May needs to take a leaf out of Trump's negotiating book? And if you think, no, Mrs. May's handling this all absolutely fine, we're going to get a good deal with the EU, then call me on 0345 6060 973. Or maybe you think, do you know what? She needs to find a backbone. Trump has proved with this remarkable few days in North Korea that sometimes, if you stand up tough to bullies, things can start to go your way, in which case text to 84850. Or maybe you think there's another approach somewhere that I'm missing in all of this, in which case tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and of course watch us on Facebook. We're live here in the London studio, and you can comment there too. And the news overnight from Korea is quite extraordinary. We saw that remarkable meeting of the two leaders take place on Friday. And yeah, I know, there have been attempts at this before, two major attempts at North and South Korea coming together, but nothing quite on this scale. And today we hear, now, whether you believe it or not, I don't know, but we hear that North Korea plans to shut its nuclear testing site in May and reveal that process to the outside world. And that is what we're being told by the South Korean government. But when it comes to negotiations, when it comes to leading a country, when it comes to Brexit, which, no question, is one of the biggest things that any peacetime government has ever had to do, does she need to take a leaf out of Trump's book? Let's just hear again, despite the wonderful news from Korea over the course of the last few days, let's just hear once again Trump's negotiating tactic for when he meets Kim Jong-un.
I may go in, may not work out, I leave.
There you go. Pretty clear, isn't it? He wants this to work. Any prospect of denuclearization on that peninsula would be extraordinary. And there's no doubt in my head that Trump so far has played an absolute blinder on this. Those Korean leaders would not have met without Trump raising this issue and, let's be fair, without China deciding it too at last had to do something. And China did. What's China done? It's made the sanctions so tough on North Korea that part of the reason that Kim is being as pleasant as he is and nice as he is his country, frankly, is on the verge of economic collapse and perhaps even starvation. So I do think this achievement by Trump is quite extraordinary. I kind of half joked on the midweek show a few days ago that maybe Trump could be in line for a Nobel Peace Prize, and that led to a fair bit of reaction on Twitter and elsewhere. But Obama got the Peace Prize. Obama was given the Peace Prize before he did anything on the basis of what he might do. Well, Trump is actually genuinely trying to denuclearize the Korean peninsula. And since I said that, I've noticed one or two commentators in this country and in America saying much the same thing. Could Trump be up for a Nobel Peace Prize? Well, I can't see it. And I'm afraid that many commentators still today don't want to credit Trump with what is going on. But hey, does Mrs May need to be more Trump-like, or am I completely missing the point? 0345 6060 973. Let's go to Mark in Palmer's Green. Good morning, Mark.
Oh, good morning, Nigel.
So,
well, you're obviously a very good friend of Donald Trump, yeah?
I confess that, Mark. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Could you ask him ever so nicely? And I know he's a very, very busy man. But could you ask him to come over and sort Brexit out for us?
Well, I think the trouble is, Mark, that when the President talks about the European Union and Brussels and the European Commission, he does so in such a way, he almost makes me sound like Ken Clark and a Europhile. But hey, maybe that's what we need, Mark.
I think so. Because this I gave my vote to this government. I gave my vote for the first time to the Tories to get this done. And
Brexit means Brexit, Mark. Remember,
Brexit means Brexit. Yeah, Brexit means Brexit. But do you know what? I think one of the most unbelievable things is that I think Brexit is now in the hands of 10 to 12 sore losers on the backbench, on the Tory backbench.
Oh, Mark, it's not in the hat. I think there's a few more people involved than that. I get your point about parliamentary arithmetic, but there's a piece out today, Mark, in the Sunday Times, and it's written by Richard Tice and John Longworth, and they head up Leave Means Leave, and I guess their most prominent key player is Jacob Rees-Mogg, and they're basically saying that what Theresa May has done, even more than being in thrall to 10 or 12 backbenchers, is she's allowed the civil service to lead these negotiations. And, of course, the civil service don't support Brexit at all.
Weak, very weak, very weak. And as far as Jacob Rees-Mogg goes, utin numero 10 melunga rem, which is Latin for get JRM in number 10.
All right, Mark, thank you. Thank you for that testimonial. Well, Mark there, a very disenchanted voter from the last general election on Brexit. Nigel, I think she should definitely take a leaf out of Trump's book, says Jan from Norwich. What do I think of the EU? Time to send in the alternative Brexit negotiating team. I get on Twitter. Look, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe actually May is handling this correctly. Maybe Trump deserves no credit for what's happened in North Korea. If you think I'm completely wide of the mark on this Sunday morning, then call 0345 6060 973 and tell me about it. In a minute, I'm going to interview Richard Tice, the co-chairman and founder of Leave Means Leave, to get his analysis of how this government is so far handling Brexit. But for now, you're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive in LBC, and it's 10:15. When Trump negotiates, he plays hardball. He threatens fire and fury. And hey, do you know what? He also gets the Chinese to put really tough sanctions on North Korea, and he's got them to the negotiating table. I think it's an amazing victory. Not everybody agrees. Ford says on Twitter, Nigel, even a stop clock is right twice a day. Just because Trump might have something to do with North Korea, it really doesn't make him a great president. You're fooling yourself. Ford, perhaps you work for the BBC, Ford, I'm not sure. They seem to be struggling at all this morning to credit the president with anything. But hey, good things are happening in Korea. And, of course, with the European Union. He talked very tough in Michigan last night about the EU. Why? Because a negotiating deadline is looming. But in all of these negotiations, Trump has one simple tactic. Here it is.
I may go in, may not work out, I leave.
I leave. And the other side knows if it doesn't work, he leaves. Well, that is a bit of a contrast, it seems to me, to what's happening in this country. And joining me now is Richard Tice, co-founder of Leave.eu. And Richard has co-authored a piece this morning in the Sunday Times. Good morning, Richard.
Nigel.
Reading your piece, it's almost as if the person really handling our Brexit negotiations isn't the Prime Minister, isn't David Davis, the Brexit Secretary. It's a shadowy civil servant.
Well, that's the truth, and he's a gentleman called Ollie Robbins, and he's been the chief negotiator for many, many months now, Nigel. And David Davis is sort of the public face of it, but seems to have lost considerable power. Ollie Robbins reports direct to the Prime Minister, and his track record over the last 8 or 9 months, sadly, is woeful, and that's why we're in the pickle we're in.
Now, he of course, himself was famous. I mean, we can all change, of course, as we get older, but he himself was famously pretty anti the Eurosceptic movement at Oxford University, wasn't he?
Well, he was. He wrote some articles, actually, defending methods in Russia and the Soviet Union. But, of course, people can change.
Yes.
But the real issue is where we are today, and the European Union are literally playing with us like a cat plays with a mouse, because they don't believe that we're prepared to walk away.
Yeah.
And this is the moment, and unless something changes rapidly, we will continue to be played with for the rest of this year, and the noise will continue. It will just get more and more embarrassing. We will end up with a really bad deal. This is the moment to wake the European Union up by changing our senior negotiators and bringing in some people who actually believe in what they're doing. If you don't believe in what you're doing, whether it's your job or what you're negotiating, you're just not going to do a very good job. And this guy, Ollie Robbins, doesn't believe in what he's doing.
Well, OK, the Prime Minister could remove Ollie Robbins and put somebody else in, and you know what? The public would barely notice. But there is a very prominent political figure out there called Amber Rudd, who's the Home Secretary, who struggled, Richard, at a lobby lunch on Thursday to say we'd be leaving the Customs Union. And also in the Sunday Times today, they report that leaked papers show she's got a new immigration plan that would water down Brexit significantly. Does she need to go as well?
Well, I think she's been struggling all week, but actually she's been probably let down by some of her Home Office officials. It's not all on her plate, and someone who gets 200, 300, 400 emails a day can't be expected to see all of them. So, no, I think the real issue is that the civil servants have got to do, they've got to follow government policy. And if they're not, then we need to bring in other people to do that job. And actually, people from outside the civil service who can come in and believe in it and negotiate the right sort of deals.
Now, June is a very, very big moment. June and October are the two really big moments, as I see it, with the negotiations this year with Brussels. June being the Irish border, October being whatever shape a future trade deal may or may not take. It seems to me, from everything that's being said by Mr Verhofstadt and Monsieur Barnier, or Barrier, as we now know him, it seems to me that the only way that they sort of let us off the hook on the Northern Irish and Republic border is that we effectively have to stay tied to all EU rules now and into the future.
Well, what's extraordinary is that no one is holding the European Union to their own internal report produced by Lars Carlson called Smart Borders 2, which sets out in very clear language how we can have a frictionless border. And, why will they not apply what their own expert recommends? I think we could well end up with a situation where we have to say we're not going to impose any form of border because actually the technology is there. We can rely on that. We can rely on electronic declarations. Small businesses don't need to worry anyway. We can have a trusted trader status. We're not going to apply anything. If you want to apply anything on the Irish side, that's your business, and it will then be you that's actually putting up barriers that are totally unnecessary. We've got to call their bluff.
Do we need to see more of David Davis and Theresa May on this subject? Because it's noticeable that David Davis has one of the most important jobs in peacetime government. I mean, certainly since 1945. We don't see much of him, do we?
Well, we see him in front of various select committees, but we need to see them focusing on the detail. And the Prime Minister probably hasn't got time to do that, but she's got to have a team of people that believe in it. And in my view, that needs to be serious Brexiteer-believing politicians, the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg and Ian Duncan-Smith, who they understand the detail, they know how it works, and they believe in it. And they should be the people who are brought in to negotiate this, rather than relying on civil servants who just don't believe it.
And finally, Richard, do you think we ought to get Donald Trump on a sort of 6-month secondment to come and be our Brexit negotiator?
I'm not sure that would be very popular, would it, Nigel?
It might be effective, though, mightn't it?
To London, is it?
Richard, thank you very much indeed. Well, that was Richard Tice, co-founder of Leave.eu, and please feel free to challenge anything that Richard said there, or anything I've said so far this morning. I am very struck. Two very different negotiating styles, and, the implication of what Tyson Longworth in their Sunday Times article today are saying is it's all been given to a civil servant who in his heart and soul doesn't believe in Brexit anyway, and it's going to rats. My next caller is Jason from Sutton. Jason, good morning.
Good morning to you, Nigel. Can you not see the irony in the Leave argument and the Brexiteers now?
Go on.
It's just getting silly. Richard Tice, the whole point of Brexit, from your perspective, was to take back control of our borders. And you've got the chair of Leave Means Leave saying, no, we're not going to put up any border whatsoever in Ireland. Anybody can come and go as they please. It's all electronic. And
Jason, there is a difference between Ireland and our relationship with every other country in Europe. And you know that. We have had, for the best part of a century, a common travel area with Ireland.
So we're going to allow goods and people to come back and forth in Northern Ireland and from Northern Ireland into Wales and the northwest of the UK. That's not taking back control. Richard Tice specifically said we're not going to have a land border with the European Union. If the EU want to put one up, then let them.
Well, that's because he's arguing what the European Parliament argued about a year ago in their report. The European Parliament then were preparing for Brexit and said, actually, there's a very smart way of doing this. We can use smart technology. We can make it happen. We don't need to construct physical fences and barriers. And of course, Jason, there are reasons there of sensitivity, aren't there?
Hold on. And yet, there's not a single border anywhere on the planet that works on that basis.
No, and there is not a single
one.
And can you name another relationship on the planet like that of Britain and Ireland? It's a unique.
Say Ukraine and Crimea.
We've got a we've had a very complex, very difficult history, and after the First World War, the Republic was formed, the Irish Free State was formed, and we've had this common travel area virtually ever since then. It is a unique relationship.
I totally get the history of what's happening in Ireland. I totally get the problems that they've got. The solutions that Brexiteers are now offering is totally opposite to what they suggested during the referendum campaign. And then second point that he made was that we should threaten and tell the EU we're just going to walk away, despite the fact every single expert research study that's ever been produced anywhere on the planet says if we just walk away, we're screwed. We'll lose our economy, we'll have severe problems, and they've detailed it. Every single one, even the economists for Brexit, led by your Patrick Minsford.
Do you, Jason, whether you're for or against Brexit, do you accept the point I'm making this morning, that whether you like Trump's style or not, there is a very, very clear negotiating strategy that Trump takes to everything, and that maybe, just maybe, our Prime Minister could take a leaf out of that book?
Well, there's an interesting one. I'm not for or against Brexit. I'm for the United Kingdom being as successful and prosperous as possible. Brexit is anti that. As far as Trump's concerned, if you look at his business history and his negotiating history, he's had over 900 court cases against him for his negotiating strategy. He's had a number of bankruptcies. He's a failed businessman. If he just put his money in a bank account when he inherited it, he'd be more wealthy today than if he ever started a business.
Don't think that flies, Jason, at all. He did inherit some money, but compared to what he's worth now, it was a relatively small sum of money, and you're quite right to say he's had a hugely checkered career, but he's worth about $7 billion, Jason, maybe 8.
Well, we won't know, will we? Because he never files his tax returns, keeps them all secret. Nobody knows what he's worth. They just listen to what he says he's worth.
Well, I tell you what, if it's all
people do anyway.
If it's all on borrowed money, he's got an awful lot of borrowed money, because there are golf courses and estates and real estate. Oh, Jason, I'm making a point that I do not think it makes much sense for the British government to have someone like Ollie Robbins being the most important person in this negotiation.
What, a faceless bureaucrat in the United Kingdom? How dare we do that, having said that the EU shouldn't have them?
Well, here's the point, actually. The point is that it's the faceless, unelected bureaucrats in Brussels. Actually, they have got faces, because Mr Juncker and Mr Barnier, and we know their name. But they're the ones who make the decisions. In this country, surely the civil service should do the politicians' bidding, not the other way around.
Well, in the EU Commission, there's about 33,000 civil servants, effectively.
Yeah.
In the UK, we've got over 405,000 supporting a nation of just 65 million. We have more civil servants bureaucracy in the UK.
And do you know what they do, Jason? Most of them spend their life enacting EU laws. Listen, we must go. Thank you. You're listening to the Sunday edition of Nigel Farage. That could have gone on all day. Exclusively on LBC. It's now 10:30, and do David Davis and Theresa May need to take a leaf out of Donald Trump's book in terms of negotiating with the European Union? Trump last night was talking about Korea, and he's very, very pleased that the two leaders of North and South Korea have met, that he's going to meet with Kim within the next few weeks. But he, even in that midst of what could have been euphoria, what does Trump say?
I may go in, may not work out, I leave.
See, that's the point. That is the Trump negotiating style. It does not appear now to be the British negotiating style. All that was said in the election about no deal is better than a bad deal seems to have disappeared completely, amidst arguments that maybe the civil service have been given too much power. But before I get back to that, just a thought on Windrush. Clearly what happened was wrong. Was it the willful intent in 2009 of a Labour government that the landing cards of those who'd come from the West Indies should be destroyed? No. Was it the willful intent of Theresa May when she came in as Home Secretary in 2010 that we should try and victimise people who've been here for 50 or 60 years? No. Of course it wasn't. There clearly has been a huge admin mistake. But that's now got conflated with the wider issue of illegal immigrants being in the country. And when Amber Rudd is asked, were there targets for getting rid of illegal immigrants? Oh, no, she says, as if to say, well, if I said there was, we'd look horrid and nasty. If the Home Office had targets for removing illegal immigrants, All they were doing was obeying the law and doing their job. Why did she shrink and run away from this and pretend she knew nothing about it? Well, it's still rumbling on. Perhaps not wholly surprisingly, London's Mayor Sadiq Khan has said overnight that it beggars belief that she did not know what was going on in her own department, and basically he's saying she needs to go. And really unhelpfully, I think, Communities Secretary, Cabinet Member Sajid Javid, whose own parents came to this country from Pakistan back in the 1960s, said his first reaction when he heard that people were being wrongly threatened with deportation was that it could have been his own family. I've no doubt he meant that sincerely, but I don't think it was particularly helpful. So, Rudd under fire for the Windrush scandal itself, which is unfair, because it clearly did, none of this happened on her watch, but clearly under fire for didn't she know about deportation targets and not appearing to know how to answer it, and now in trouble over future plans for EU migrants to have preferential access and not being able to say clearly to a press lunch that we should leave the customs union. And I don't know, there are some that say, well, actually, Amber Rudd will stay. She's there. She's the human shield for the Prime Minister. After all, the Prime Minister was the Home Secretary, the longest-serving Home Secretary in 150 years, and some think she's in a very strong position because of that. I don't know. I get the impression she's rather been left out there on her own. Another difficult week, I think, facing Amber Rudd. Back to those contrasting styles of Trump and May and whether May should take a leaf out of his book. June on Facebook says, Nigel, I agree a lot of what you say, but not in Theresa May's situation. She is the PM and does not have the luxury of spouting on media channels. Doesn't stop Trump, June, does it? And actually, wouldn't we like to see a little bit more clarity from Theresa May on Brexit and where we're going? There seems to be a real marked absence of it in recent times. Helen asks, if Parliament has a vote at the end of these negotiations and we don't like the result, can we ask for another vote? Oh, Helen, not more and more and more and more referendums. I believe we've had our referendum. I don't now think there's going to be another one. Although, to be fair, there are many in the House of Lords and quite a lot in the House of Commons that would like to force that upon us. Tony says the financial expertise is already moving or has moved to European cities. Oh, no, it hasn't, Tony. Deutsche Bank have just taken a 20-year lease on a huge piece of real estate right in the middle of the city of London. Can Trump and his expert team do some negotiating with the EU on behalf of Britain, says Anne in Kingston? Well, that's rather what I think. Trump is a strong, free-thinking leader who puts his country first and rejects virtue signalling. May is the opposite, says Michael. So we've got both sides of the opinion here. Let's ask Anil, who's calling from Norbury, what he thinks. Good morning.
Mr. Farage, good morning to you. You say Theresa May should take a leaf out of his book.
Well,
what are you referring to? The Art of the Deal?
Well, what I'm talking about, Anil, specifically, is, May, in the Brexit means Brexit general election, said quite rightly that no deal is better than a bad deal. That has now been dropped, Anil. We are now making a whole series of concessions, and the one thing that Barnier...
About the style, Mr. Farage.
The one thing I know that Barnier and Verhofstadt know is that she's not going to walk away, whereas Trump was very, very clear. Let's just listen to Trump.
I may go in, may not work out, I leave.
The point I'm making is that is a more effective negotiating style than Theresa May's.
No, actually, he didn't write the book. It was somebody called Tony Schwartz. It was ghostwritten for him. He has no skills as such. The only two skills he has, bluff and bluster.
Right, but what do you say he didn't write the book? Many famous figures who publish books have them ghostwritten for them.
Yes, but he should acknowledge that he didn't write it. He's the president. And people kept saying we should respect the office of the presidency, but he himself doesn't respect the office.
Well, I think he does. He's just got a different style, a different way of doing things.
Well, I can go out in the street with some bullies, That doesn't mean it's a good style.
All right, well, okay. Right, you clearly don't like him or his style, and a lot of people feel the way that you do. Would you at least acknowledge that what he's done in North Korea is quite extraordinary?
To a certain extent, yes. But apart from that, I don't think he has achieved much for his
Well, I tell you what. If he brings about world peace, and stops North Korea becoming a nuclear power, that on its own would be a monumental achievement.
Look what he's trying to do in Iran. He's trying to undo the deal, so there'll be more trouble in the Middle East. And I think there's more trouble from the Middle East than from North Korea.
Well, Iran is a country that he does not trust. He sees Iran as being a state sponsor of terrorism. He sees the Iran deal as being a lot of US taxpayers' money being given to Iran in return for a series of assurances that aren't actually being checked or backed up.
Yeah, so all the who back the deal are wrong, are they?
Actually, I have to say, I'm very suspicious of the Iran deal. I don't like the look of it myself at all. I know the European Union love it. The British government love it. I'm not sure that it's right. And to be fair, he was very much elected promising the American public he would reverse that deal. So it is kind of democracy in action too, isn't it?
He was elected to build the wall and bring back work to the Rust Belt. I don't think American public is interested in foreign affairs. They hardly know what's going on beyond their own state.
Oh, don't be sad. They're not all, they're not all sort of, hicks living up in their hills. I mean, I know.
Rust Belt, oh?
Well, are jobs coming back to the Rust Belt? Yes, they are. Has the wall been built? Not yet, but I agree with you. He needs to do that to maintain his promise.
What do you mean the jobs are coming back to the Rust Belt? Which jobs?
Oh, if you look at job creation in those Midwestern states where he won with such tiny majorities, but where he won with tiny majorities in areas where Hillary thought she would win, jobs and money are coming back to America. And whichever way you cut this, the American economy is growing at 3.1% per year. In some states, it's as high as 4.5%. Now, you could argue he inherited a good economy, but on that side of it, he's doing pretty well.
I mean, the only alteration he has made is tax cuts for the rich. I mean, how does that affect the jobs within 1 year?
Huge numbers. And actually, if you're a rich person living in New York, there's almost no tax cut at all because of the way it writes off against local state taxes. And what you've seen are big corporations now promising huge numbers of new jobs, giving bonuses to workers on huge scale. Anil, you and I are not going to agree on this. I thank you. Let's go to Kumar in Ealing. Good morning, Kumar.
Good morning, sir. Great privilege to talk to you, since you're probably one of the two best politicians of the last 25 years.
Oh, gosh.
What we know about Trump and Korea is the following. Now, if you accept that Kim is a megalomaniac and a dictator and an ego to... You really think that sort of man is going to cower to the belligerent rhetoric of Trump? I don't think so. And clearly you don't know Korean psyche. The truth of the matter is that the reason why Kim came to the negotiating table on Friday in a historic agreement was because he had been read the Riot Act a month earlier by Xi Jinping. And the reason Xi Jinping read him the Riot Act is that Trump accidentally, and this is where I credit Trump 10% credit, but 90% goes to Xi Jinping, because Trump had stumbled upon Xi Jinping's Achilles heel, which is trade tariffs. And that's, given that the Chinese economy has fallen from 10% 10 years ago during the Olympics to 6.3% now, clearly a 40% decline is massive, and he can't afford for a further decline. Now, what do we know about Trump? We know that he's debased the political debate with the terms of fake news and calling people lying, cheating, lying, crooked, etc., which, thank God, we don't have in this country. And I think when I've seen debates with you, you've always been polite to people, and people, for the most part, been polite to you. The other thing we know about Trump, he's a pathological liar. And we found out this week he used to use an alter ego called John Barron and John Miller, trying to bump up his net worth. And he is so insecure that he has to put on a fake personality and call journalists and say he's worth more than he is. The other thing we know, that as a businessman, it's a total myth, because it takes a real skill to lose $1 billion, I would have thought, in a month.
Kumar, the one thing he is an extraordinarily good salesman, and he has proved on some big real estate deals that he's done that he can be highly effective as well. And on the Korean thing, and this is perhaps key. This is perhaps key to negotiating South Kumar. Just have a listen to South Korea's foreign minister telling a CNN correspondent on Friday what she thought.
Clearly, credit goes to President Trump. He's been determined to come to grips with this from day one.
Now, that is the foreign minister of South Korea. And you're right, though. He put the squeeze on China. China acted. China has put, really tough sanctions on, and that's what's got Kim to the table. It's a combination of the two, but Trump was the catalyst for this. Go on.
May I respond?
Yeah.
Just briefly? I promise to be brief.
Yeah.
You see my statements on point. First of all, she's the foreign minister of South Korea. What do you think she's going to say? It's like Mandy Reese Davis. She would say that, wouldn't she? Get real. Please get real. But you say he's a salesman. I say he's a con man because he claimed his net worth was higher than it was, claiming that he'd inherited so much property from his father. He hadn't. He only inherited his property from his father in 1999. We're going back to the 80s when he was trying to get into the Forbes rich list. So he's a total, and it should have been Art of the Dodgy Deal. Tony Schwartz has said himself, I should have renamed it the Art of the Dodgy Deal.
Can you say, Kumar, just to sort of finish off this, and we understand your position and you've got a lot of passion on this, can you say anything good about Trump as president?
Sure, absolutely. He's a very brilliant con man, and he's based. And that's why you two are peas in a pod. You deserve each other.
Well, that's very sweet of you, and a very, very happy Family Sunday to you as well, Kumar. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 10:47. Does Mrs May need to take a leaf out of Donald Trump's negotiating book by making it very clear? Let's listen to it.
I may go in, may not work out, I leave.
Maybe that's what she's got to do with Brussels. She did kind of hint at this in the election, but it all seems to have been dropped. So that's what we're talking about. But my favourite story of the morning, I love it. Exposed. Russians tried to swing election for Corbyn. Thousands of robot Twitter accounts bombarded voters. In fact, measuring the number of these accounts compared to the Brexit referendum, there were many, many, many times the number. So I rather like this because the very group of people who've been saying that Brexit happened because of the Russians, that Trump happened because of the Russians, now find themselves the beneficiaries of the Russians. But it didn't help them win the election. So how is this conspiracy that people mucking about on Twitter could have swung it for Trump or swung it for Brexit? I'm bored with all of this. I'm bored with this Russian collusion story. Can we please now call it a score draw and all move on? Let's go to James in Beaconsfield. James, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. One of the things I have to say about you, which May lacks, is you do things with passion and vigour, and your Brexit campaign reflected that. And May lacks an awful lot of that, as the Trump is very passionate as well. But what I wanted to say was, I believe Kim Jong did what he did so that he would get... It's the old shakedown where you go into a pub, you start a fight, and then you say, oh, if you pay us, we won't fight anymore. So I think that's where he has gone with that. He's done it.
Oh, gosh, James, I don't know where you are, but this forecast of big northerly gales appears to have struck Beaconsfield already. Get somewhere quieter, call us back, please. John is calling from Chigwell. Good morning, John.
Hi, Nigel. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, and I'm fascinated by people's reaction to this contrast between the Trump style and the May style, and maybe he's got something that she hasn't.
Well, do you think that Theresa May would phone Good Morning Britain and ramble on for 30 minutes?
Mrs Thatcher, Mrs Thatcher, I remember calling into Jimmy Young and calling into the Today programme. So Margaret used to do things like that. Yes, John?
Yeah, 3 days ago, Donald Trump called Fox and Friends, and he rambled on so much that the host had to say to him, well, Mr. President, I'm sure you've got better things to do, and put the phone down on him, because he was right. I would suggest that everybody actually watches that clip on YouTube. Nigel, look, your mate Donald Trump, this is a man who lied to get on the Forbes rich list, right, so that he could make himself into the person he is, because once you get on the Forbes rich list, this means that you can borrow billions and billions of pounds, and that's what happened. People have borrowed him all this money on the back of a lie. If you think that Mr. Kim, right, is going to be outsmarted by Donald Trump, you've got another thing coming. The only reason why Mr. Kim is meeting with Donald Trump is because he doesn't have a mountain to fire his little rockets from anymore. Right?
Do you know, John, when Obama was president, rather than facing up to the increasing threat to the world of North Korea, with that regime developing its nuclear ambitions, what Obama chose to do was to hide away from it and do nothing. When Trump came to power and looked at this, he could have done exactly the same thing. He said, no, this is a genuine threat, not just to America, but to Japan and to many other parts of the world, and I'm going to do something about it. And he talked tough. He persuaded the Chinese to do it. And John, you know, you can dislike his style. You can be against his sort of bravado, and you may be right when you say that he's over-egged his CV at times. Well, there aren't many in the world that haven't done that at some point in their lives. But you know, but John, I think that by talking tough, he's managed to get Kim to the negotiating table. And even if Kim is not wholly sincere, isn't that a good thing?
You know, look. What I think that Donald Trump should do, is he should mind his own business from other countries and think about the thousands of Americans who are killed every year by guns in his country. That would be a better take-up of his time to ban guns in this country, because you said how strong he is.
Yeah.
And, it would take a very strong president, to come along. Right, and to come along and take on the gun lobby. Why doesn't he do that? Because there's thousands of Americans being killed. I know,
and
forget the.
Actually, John, there are more Americans being killed by obesity every year than are being killed by guns. There are lots of things presidents could do, but he's done something good here, I believe. John, I thank you. Joy says, and I agree with this totally. Message on Facebook. Joy says, "Where on earth is the PM at this crucial time? Both she and Amber Rudd should be sacked." Well, I agree with the first bit. Where is the PM at this crucial time? Hazel says, "I think PM May must be giving Amber Rudd advice." OK, pretty sarcastic there from Hazel. Mike is calling from where? Mike, does the Prime Minister need to learn a thing or two from the Trump philosophy, which is you walk in being prepared to walk away?
Absolutely. And I think if that had been the attitude from the outset, we would have been a lot further down the road to breaking free from the EU than we are now. I think that the attitude from the EU has been all along to dangle a carrot in front of us, but they've been taking, and we've already conceded far too much. And I can tell you what really terrifies me about this whole situation is that our government is choosing to disregard the impact of the immigration has had on this country, uncontrolled levels of immigration. They disregard the housing crisis.
Wow, Mike, you're speaking on the Sunday when Boris Johnson is proposing an amnesty for up to 700,000 illegal immigrants, when the Home Secretary Amber Rudd, according to this leaked report, is looking at continuing to give EU nationals increased access. And it looks, Mike, although this government intends to do almost nothing about the subject.
Well, all I can say is that one of the main reasons for your success was not the situation with regard to, it wasn't immigrant bashing, it was trying to make people aware of the impact that uncontrolled levels of immigration have had on this country and are continuing to have. And I cannot for the life of me understand why none of the government seem to acknowledge it. It's not numbers is a big issue. I understand that. We do need people in this country to do certain jobs, but the thing is, they've completely overlooked the fact that there are a number of companies in this country that advertise exclusively in Eastern Europe for jobs.
Oh, I know. And they're going to do nothing about it, Mike. Absolutely nothing. Mike, I thank you. I've got time for one last quick call on this. Martin from Epsom, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Thank you for squeezing me in.
Not one bit. So, does May need to take a leaf out of Trump's book, or is Trump just a wrong 'un?
Well, I wanted to point out a couple of things that might change your mind on Trump. Let me know what you think afterwards. Of course, he's not the first person to be offered a meeting with the North Korean leader. That goes all the way back to Mr. Bill Clinton, then George W., then Barack Obama, all had the opportunity to go. And all of them were, of course, advised by their respective left or right administrations not to.
Second point.
And then you said that Obama decided to hide away, when in fact, at the beginning of his presidency, he actually said he would like to meet with Kim Jong-il, it was at the time.
Yes.
And your friends over at Fox and the alt-right lot started berating him like mad. If you look at the contrast between the news reporting from Fox
Well,
of
but the point is, Martin, he didn't, and Obama promised to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and didn't, and he promised to intervene in Syria. He had a red line and then he didn't. The point I'm making, Martin, is they're different styles. Trump does get stuff done. Thank you. Moving on. Pope Francis has led tributes to young Alfie Evans after the toddler's parents announced his death. Tom Evans and Kate Jones said they were heartbroken after the terminally ill youngster died in hospital on Saturday. There is a big debate here over parental responsibility. Who should have the say over a terminally ill child? And if you think doctors are best equipped to make all those decisions, call 0345 6060 973, or perhaps like me, you think parents have a right over their child's final days, text to 84850, or maybe you're happy that the courts banned little Alfie from going to Italy for receiving other treatment, in which case tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. Watch us on Facebook. We're live from London next.